Hello, everyone. Hopefully, you're having a fantastic 2020 Memorial Day. We have a little special thing as a thank you for all of our soldiers and our healthcare workers this year because they come under this heading with everything that's been going on. So, we have a story from Wally T. Young, accompanied by Caden Young on strings. Enjoy. A Soldier's Tale. Let me tell you a tale of a brave land of liberty. One day, I wandered through a cemetery, reading the headstones. I enjoy doing this from time to time. I strolled into a section with a flag flapping in the breeze over a field of white marble crosses. An older gentleman stepped up next to me and with a deep breath commented, "All brave souls." As I recall, I just nodded in agreement, not really looking to strike up a conversation. The old-timer stepped over to a white cross and placed his hand on it and looked me in the eye and said, "You mind if I tell you a story?" Not giving me a chance to respond, "You know, it seems like only yesterday I was a young man like yourself." The man stepped back over to me and took my hand and said, "Well, it all started a long time ago." As he spoke, the cemetery around us faded away. As reality came back into focus, I was startled, as we were now standing in a room filled with people dressed in odd attire and shouting. The old-timer leaned over and whispered in my ear, "This is how dreams are born." Then one of the men spoke above the rest, and with his words I realized where I was. All men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. I was witnessing the American Declaration of Independence. But as I turned to take it all in, the room once again faded away. We now stood in the middle of a beautiful field, the sun shining down on tall grass and wild flowers, gently waving in the breeze. Then off in the distance we could hear drums playing a march. From behind us a voice shouted, and I ducked as the crackling sound of a cannonball slicing through the air buzzed overhead. It took only a few moments, and the beautiful, peaceful field was filled with men carrying muskets, swords, and pistols. The American colonists and the King's army had met. The sweet smell of the wildflowers filling the air was replaced with the smell of smoke and death. Some of the colonists didn't even have guns and used pitchforks as weapons, and though mortally wounded, many fought on until their dying breath. As the scene continued to progress, the reality of how cruel this war really was became apparent. The old-timer commented, "Freedom has a heavy cost." When the battle came to an end, I was not really sure who won or lost this day, for as we walked through the field, it seemed there were so many fallen souls from both sides. There was two sides and dressed in many different uniforms and some not even in a uniform. They now had one thing in common. They all had given their life this day. They had given that life for something that they believed in. We came upon a fallen colonist dressed in the traditional blue uniform. He was still grasping a life. Up until that moment, we had gone unseen. But I can still remember the icy cold chill that crawled up my spine as I realized this fallen man could now see me standing over him. As we knelt down next to the man lying there, dying on the battlefield, the old-timer grabbed his hand and the fallen soldier smiled at him and then turned to me and said, "Never forget, we died protecting freedom." With these words, he passed on to the next life. As I reached to close his eyes, he vanished. the fallen soldier vanished, I found a torn and battered flag hanging from my hand had replaced him. I stood and held the flag up, red and white stripes, a field of blue with a few stars. I was holding an American flag left behind during a battle. I looked around me, and the field was different now. The men that lay dead on this field were dressed in much different uniforms. I realized this was a much darker part of America's history, as these uniforms were gray and blue. This was a time when freedom had been trod upon by the very nation that proclaimed to be free. Brother was pit against brother, neighbor against neighbor, and state against state. America was a nation divided. I looked around, knowing it was proper to dispose of this tattered flag with fire, but for some reason I just was not able to bring myself to do it. I thought that this flag belonged to all the men who had fell during this battle. After all, both sides were still Americans. I found a pole that had been dropped and attached the torn and tattered but still proud flag. As I placed the pole atop a small mound of dirt, the wind filled the banner with life, and we watched as it waved gracefully in the breeze. I looked over to the old-timer, and with a soft smile and a nod, "Now the men who died here today can rest in peace." With this comment, once again the scene faded into another time and place. As all came into focus, I could see a young couple holding hands walking along a moonlit beach. The old-timer said, "Ah, she was so beautiful. I had just proposed to her, and we had decided to marry in the spring." With this, I heard a low rumble that became louder, and the scene before us shimmered, and we were now overlooking a tropical harbor. I gazed upwards to see a sky now filled with planes. The old-timer spoke in a dry, flat tone. "The Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor the day after I proposed to my sweetheart. When we heard of the news of the attack, I knew that I had to help defend our nation. So on that day, I kissed my lovely bride-to-be goodbye, and I joined the Marines." The old-timer said, "I still remember how proud I was in my new uniform as a crowd waved and cheered for my brothers in arms and I as the ship pulled away from the dock." The old-timer told me he was posted to the European theater. I fought one of the darkest and evil armies the world has ever seen, Nazi Germany. Time went by, and the day we planned for our wedding came and went. A short leave was due me, so we planned to get married at that time. The months went by, and I had one more mission, and I would be able to return to her. I listened as he continued on with his tale as the scene faded into a small little European town. We attacked in the morning before the rooster crowed. After a long, hard-fought battle, the German forces were just too much and overpowered us. We should have retreated, but we fought on and on. Once again, we stood amongst a battle scene, bombs exploding all around us. Yet I was able to hear the old-timer telling his tale clear as a bell. As the enemy surrounded us, all I could think was that we needed to break through. As he said this, I could tell that the man right in front of us was the younger version of the old-timer. He moved from trench to trench, then a grenade exploded next to him. I quickly turned to face the old man at my side. "It paralyzed me from the hips down," he commented. As I lay there, all I could think about was my lovely wife-to-be, and I would never get to enjoy our wedding day, and hoping she would understand why. A man dressed in a clean blue and white colonial army uniform walked up to the wounded man before us. We watched as the colonial soldier knelt down and touched the shoulder of my fallen guide. The old-timer said in a soft, trembling voice, all my pain ceased with his touch, and he answered my question. "Don't worry, she understands, and she is very proud of you." As I saw the younger version of the man who had brought me on this tour of history pass, I returned to the cemetery where it all started. I turned to face the old-timer to find that I was now alone. So I looked down at the white cross before me and knelt down to read the inscription. Here lies a brave man who died for his nation and the protection of others' freedom. It was the last word inscribed on this stone that chilled my very soul. For where there should have been the name of this brave soul, read only, unknown. In honor of those who've fallen and served, protecting our freedom and our lives, everyone, if you can at home, please stand for our national anthem. We just want to say thank you to all the men and women who have served throughout the years and to everyone who is currently serving. And also we want to thank Logan for shooting this video for us. And everyone have a fantastic, safe Memorial Day.